Hi, guys, and welcome back to Exit Music for a Film, a podcast breaking down some of Hollywood's most recent theatrical releases. I'm your host, Ken Perry. In today's episode, Parasite. Parasite is a story of the unemployed Kim family taking a particular interest in wealthy and glamorous parks as they integrate themselves into their lives and get entangled in an unexpected incident. Parasite is the talk of the movie year thus far of 2019 and all the major film festivals of this year. It won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, which serves as one of the biggest film festivals of the year and its biggest award given out for Movie of the Year. This is director Bong Joon-Ho's seventh film, and from what I hear from many critics and viewers, very possibly his most complete and best film to date. This is a South Korean-based film and takes place in Seoul, South Korea. This is our first international film review here at Exit Music for a Film. So this is a very good one to start with because Bong Joon-ho is honestly one of the biggest Korean directors of modern times, and honestly one of the biggest international directors, and he's leading the Korean New Wave currently, which has taken the film world by storm in recent years. Now, I am a little bit embarrassed to say that this is my first Bong Joon-ho movie I've seen. I've seen parts of Snowpiercer as it had a long run on HBO a few years back when it was newer. But I look forward to looking further into the filmography and working my way backwards through Bong Joon-ho's filmography, as this movie absolutely blew me away. Parasite was a thriller, but is referred to by director Bong himself as a tragic comedy, which is very interesting, but certainly a truth and quite, and a concise and on-the-nose observation by the creator himself. I think any audience member that has viewed this film can certainly see this. It's a great observation, and it's a great term. This film clearly sheds a light on social class disparity and differences. It focuses on the rich versus not only the working class and not only the poor, but it sets up a kind of a rich versus non, or rich versus everyone mentality in a way. The director Bong focuses on the wealth gap in this film, and from what I'm told, society relationships and relationships between the society's members are present in many of his films. It's something that he tends to focus on a lot, and is obviously ingrained heavily in his brain, being from South Korea. And I recognize that even in the little bit I've seen of Snowpiercer as well. Parasite particularly brings ideas of capitalism, a person's aspiration for a better daily life, and at the same time feelings of despair to the forefront of its audience's minds. This movie, above all, is very literal investigation of social class disparities that affect thousands of people, not only in Seoul, South Korea, where director Bong is from and where this film takes place, and not only here in the United States, but across the world and all over the world. And that's what I believe makes this such a powerful and effective film. I'd now like to take a look deeper into the two families in this film, the Kims and the Parks. Within this film, there are various examples of the differences between the two families. Director Bong has made this a very visual film, and it's certainly on purpose. When we open on the movie, we open with our main characters, the Kim family. They're living rough when we meet them, and they're struggling to make ends meet as a family unit. At the open of the film, the four members of the family are working as a unit, and they're putting together pizza boxes for a local pizza chain. And the family, this is like a family job, and I don't know how, common that is, I guess, in South Korea, if that's a thing. Certainly not a thing here, but Anyways, the business that they're working for doesn't seem to be happy with the Kim's output. They're not doing a great job of I guess their quality management, and they unfortunately fire the entire family in the beginning of the film, which creates just a feeling of despair for the family. And early on, we also hear, Mr. Kim mention various failed business ventures that have been attempted by the family in recent years. We know that he was at times he was a personal driver, which comes into the film later. But they mention things such as attempting to open and run a bakery, and just many failed business ventures that just hadn't worked out for them. Now I know many people won't like this, term and don't even really believe in it, but the Kim family truly are victims of capitalism, and that's what director Bong is trying to portray in the opening of this film. All hope seems lost, pretty much for the Kims. Very much down on their luck, and until the son of the family, his friend, plants the seed of an idea of basically how he can make some extra money, basically by tutoring a he seems to be a bright young kid, and his good friend's going away, and he offers to put in a good reference for him to take over as a wealthy young girl's I guess English tutor, so to speak. Parks, on the other hand, this family that goes on to hire this the son. Mr. Park's a very successful businessman, and he's made the most of the opportunities that he's given or have made for himself. He seems to be a very caring and loving husband and father. And Mrs. Park is seems to be a young housewife. We were told in the beginning of the film, when the Kim's son is speaking about this possible opportunity to take over these tutoring lessons for the Park's daughter. The his friend, the original tutor, kind of makes note that Mrs. Park is a young housewife that's kind of dumb and I guess ditzy. Uh, is she a gold digger? I mean, possibly. She's a younger, I guess kind of attractive girl, woman. So she possibly is. I guess that's kind of up for interpretation. But she truly does care about her two children, her son and her daughter, and just wants the absolute best for them in every aspect of their lives. And this is what the Kims use, as well as the fact that money is like truly no object for the Park family. These elements are what they use to truly infiltrate the Park's lives. Uh, when I thought of the synopsis for this movie, something came to my mind, and it kind of I like to take credit for this. I like the idea. When I tried to sum this movie up, I came up with the following. I said that Parasite is the story of two nuclear families from very different economic backgrounds coming together, but only to the knowledge of one of these families. I think that really sums up the idea, the overall idea of this film, and I was I was proud of that. The story's just brilliant, in my opinion. It kept me very interested throughout its runtime. Um, Most of the film takes place in the Park's home, which is absolutely beautiful. It's a architectural, astonishment. It's just an absolutely beautiful home. It was said to be designed by a very high profile South Korean architect, which is brought up by Mrs. Kim. Or not Mrs. Kim, I'm sorry, Mrs. Park. This is very different from the small and cluttered Kim home that we open the film on and revisit a few times throughout the movie. I want to make note that, as I said earlier, this Bong Joon-Ho did a great job making this a very visual film, and on purpose, he definitely shot these two houses or these homes of these families very differently. We see in the Kim's home, it's very cluttered and it's very claustrophobic. We open on them at the very small dinner table, and everyone's almost like on top of each other. Honestly, The quarters are very narrow, and the rooms it's just an overall dirty feel in the house. It seems like, and juxtaposed with the Parks house, it's which is so very open and free, just absolutely beautiful with many really nice luxurious items all around the home. It just the juxtaposition of the two homes directly represents the difference between the two families and the economic state each is in. Just for anyone that is not fully aware, I'll now elaborate as how the Kims specifically infiltrated the lives of the fabulous Park family. So as mentioned earlier, the son's friend mentions that he could make some good money by tutoring the Park's daughter and being an English tutor for her, which is the job that he was doing. They apparently pay very well. So he gets a good reference from his friend, meets with Mrs. Park. Mrs. Park really likes him, hires him. As he's tutoring the young girl, he notices that basically the Parks somehow become in need of a art therapy teacher for the young boy, the younger child. He needs an art therapy teacher as he enjoys art and is dealing with some post traumatic issues. So they want to get him an art teacher or an art therapist tutor. So he basically uh, he basically gives a reference to his sister without it letting it be known that they are brother and sister, that they are siblings. From there, the daughter somehow ensures, I won't get into it, somehow ensures that Mr. Park will become in need of a new driver, who therefore there then they make reference for a great driver who ends up being the two children's father, Mr. Kim. So therefore, at this point, we're three Kim members into the working for the Parks family, and finally, by some crazy by some crazy way, the Parks become in desperate need for a new full time housekeeper. Which who else other than a great reference from Mr. Kim? He puts a good reference in for his wife, who at the time they do not make it known that is his wife, and that he simply knows of a company that only promotes the best in housekeepers. So at one point, or at finally, I guess, at full form, all four members of the Kim family have infiltrated and now are working inside of the Park house without the Parks knowing that any of them truly know each other on a deep level, other than just mere acquaintances. Uh, Again, I believe this plot is of this film was just fantastic. This idea is amazing. This kept me interested, and once all four family members are in the house and in the Parks' lives, it was tense throughout. Though the Parks seemed to be good people overall, there were some moments that reminded us of, like, the way some wealthy people could, though they're good people. I will not say that the Parks are villains in any sense of this story. There's sometimes very wealthy people could kind of lose touch with common society through sometimes not even realizing it, and they tend to start treating and looking down on the lower class and treating them poorly. There's a few examples that were done subtly and very well in this, with regards of how the Parks treated their employees, so to speak. The, Initially, the ease of which they let both the original driver and the housekeeper go, they completely changed two people's lives in the worst way. For the worst, cut them out off of their main source of income, without even a second thought. Now, I will granted, the housekeeper was let go due to the belief that she had come down with TB, and Mrs. Park simply wanted to, protect her children and her family from, health scare, a pretty large health scare, So that's understandable, but just they treated the driver very, very poorly. But they let these people go without a second thought of that's just a total loss of income for those people. There was a lot of talking shit on Mr. Kim once he was established himself as a solid driver for Mr. Park. Mr. Park, it was noted that many times he spoke of how Mr. Kim had a bad smell, and then he started picking up on the smell on other kind of, I guess, family members or his employees. It was brought up a few times, and it was very unfortunate and sad to see when Mr. Kim, heard these insults for himself. And then he mentions to his wife also that Mr. Kim is a great driver, but he's almost always just stop shy of overstepping his boundaries. When anytime we see Mr. Kim driving Mr. Park around, in my opinion, he's nothing but kind and not very overbearing at all, in my opinion. So he's simply just almost looking for a reason to not like Mr. Kim as an employee. Now the scene, another major one is the scene where Mrs. Park is being driven around by Mr. Kim. She's sitting in the back seat and she's on the phone call and she's preoccupied. She puts her feet up on the headrest of the seat in front of her, almost in Mr. Kim's face, basically, while driving. And then she has the audacity to complain about the nasty smell in the car. It's almost comedic how rude and just self-involved she was in that scene. That was a great scene. Very effective. And fourth and finally, the climax scene of the movie, which I'm not going to spoil here, but it takes place at the Park's son's birthday party. The scene was very scary because it had a very authentic feel to this. It seems like something that could actually happen in real life, and that you would maybe even hear about on the news. It was easily the scariest scene of the film. It was terrifying. That's an aspect of this film that works very highly in its favor, in my opinion. It's realistic, and this is something that could definitely happen in the world today. I mean, it's not very likely or anything, but I've heard crazier stories than what goes on in this film. Now, though I didn't wish to spoil the climax, I do want to point out an earlier spoiler in the film at this point in the podcast, in which I'll just say for lack of a better way of saying it, we discover that the Kims are not the only less fortunate people that are dependent on the Parks to get by. I thought this was important to bring up in this review because the Kims get very protective and defensive once they discover what's going on. They get defensive of their, I guess, for lack of a better word, their meal ticket, I'd like to call it. And this aspect of, it's almost like these two less fortunate families or less fortunate units are kind of fighting over the crumbs of the rich, which is, very sad. I think it drives the point home just how strongly, if not, more than this is more insane than their initial plan of, them fighting over these crumbs and treating each other so poorly and not like humans at all. This is, even more insane than their initial plan to, put forth by the Kim family to just infiltrate and live off these people. At this point in the story, they've basically, lost all regard for the lives of their fellow man, and in many, this can be seen as, villainous. The Kims could be viewed certainly as villains in this moment in the story. We go from just, feeling very sad for this family to them, basically turning into villains and turning into what they hated. Just it shows how hard it is for them to get by. This movie drives home its message and commentary on social class disparity and the wealth gap very, very, very directly and with great power. This is what it. This is what makes this film so effective and so powerful and so just well made. All in all, I loved the film. It was very, very different, and it was a breath of fresh air upon its first viewing. This is definitely high on my lists for the best films of the year so far, and we're getting towards the end of the calendar year here. I'm very excited to now after seeing this look at director Bong Joon-Ho's previous films, and if they're anything like this, I'm in for quite a treat, I'd say. I'd now like to take a minute and just talk about the Oscar expectations for this film, as I don't want to ruin too much of the plot. So first of all, South Korea, upon my research, I've discovered that South Korea has never even been nominated for an Oscar. Now, with the buzz that this film has received over the season of these festivals, these film festivals throughout the summer, I think this is certainly a shoe-in to win Best International or Best Foreign Film this year. This is this year's Roma without a doubt. I think director Bong Joon-ho will certainly be nominated for Best Director. I would be definitely surprised if he wasn't, but this is going to be a stiff category with the likes of Martin Scorsese for The Irishman and Quentin Tarantino for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and additional ones that are just escaping my mind right now. Possibly Noah Baumbach for Marriage Story. It's going to be a very tough category comparatively to recent years. I think this movie definitely has a shot at one of my favorite categories, which is Best Original Screenplay. It is a competitive year again for this category as well, with the likes of Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which will certainly be in there for the race, and which I think is possibly the front runner at this point, as well as many A24 candidates, such as The Farewell from earlier this year, Marriage Story, which is coming out here in a couple weeks, as well as Waves, that's in theaters right now. It'll be a tough race for sure. We shall see who prevails, though, for my favorite category, Best Original Screenplay. Finally, I genuinely do believe that this film does, in fact, have a legitimate shot at the big award this year. I won't say it's necessarily a front runner or that it will even turn into it as the race heats up going into February when the Oscars will be taking place, but director Bong Joon-ho has made a very, very powerful and effective film this year. It's very impactful. The message is so impactful, and this movie is not being ignored by critics and viewers alike. Parasite's a true contender for the big race, and I certainly believe that. All right, guys, let's get to our categories now. Peak performance. Number 1, peak performance. I have to give it to director Bong Joon-ho for simply creating such an effective film with such an important and effective message in today's world. It's placed directly at the forefront of this movie. It doesn't hide it at all. There's symbolism, but it's not hiding behind anything. The theme, the message is at the forefront of this film, and I respect that so much. I'll leave it at that, as I've basically, a lot of what I've discussed is just how great of a job director Bong has done with this film in detail earlier. Parasite it's simply a brilliant film, and I'm going to leave it at that. Alright, number 2, Pantheon placement. Where does this rank in director Bong Joon-ho's filmography? Well, I have no choice here but to put it number 1, because again, this is the first full Bong Joon-ho film that I've sat through. But from many critics and viewers that they state this is his best, and most complete work to date. Okay, it's time for our IMDb film fact, not sponsored by IMDb yet. So basically, our film fact this time around is that the site of which most of this film takes place, the Park House, which is a architectural achievement, we found out was built specifically for this movie, which was a very big surprise to me. Now, I assume that's included in the. I don't. Is that included in the budget of the film? I mean, because that really changes the budget numbers if that's technically included to create like a beautiful home like that. Even if it was not fully constructed, this place was absolutely beautiful. It's somewhere that a very high end celebrity would live. The fact that this was made specifically for this movie was a very surprising piece of trivia for me. And how I think director Bong should live there when he goes back to Seoul. That's why not? That's just a beautiful. If it is in fact a whole home, he should definitely be living there. All right, see, stream, or skip. Now I got to see this film at the Hollywood Theater, which is a small independent theater here in Pittsburgh. Now I had a great time. I haven't been to the Hollywood in a few years. I think the last movie I've seen that I saw there was the original 1978 Halloween. We went to see that a few years ago, for Halloween season, and this is only I think maybe my third time seeing a film there, and I just had a great time. If you could find this on, I think Parasite's playing on a lot of small screens and independent theaters right now. If you could, not that it certainly matters, but I just had a great time. Plus, I mean, the Hollywood lets you bring beer in. Not, just saying. Um, this is obviously it's also very important to support your local independent theaters as well as the chains. Uh, I had a blast at this viewing. I had a really good time. We went Saturday night, and I hope to attend this theater and the other ones similar to it in my area a lot more in the near future and going into next year. So yeah, I had a great time. If possible, if you could find it, go see this. Especially if you could find it in an independent theater. All right, the official exit music, exit rating. I've thought about this a lot since seeing the movie. I wanted to let it sink in a lot because I loved it from the minute I walked out of the theater. I'm giving Parasite a solid 8, and again, this is certainly high on my list for best films of 2019. I'm very happy I got to experience Parasite. It certainly lives up to its height. Alright, guys, now before we get out of here, we're going to look ahead to coming attractions, as we always do. Now, I lied to you guys last time. I said that our next episode was going to be Irishman, but that's the fun of the show, throwing some curveballs. Didn't think we'd be able to, I'd get to see Parasite in the theater going experience. I thought I was going to have to wait to stream it. Uh, Luckily, that wasn't the case, though. So, looking ahead, I could almost 100% say with 100% certainty that the our next episode is going to be Martin Scorsese's The Irishman. It's out in limited runs in theaters right now, but it's going to drop on Netflix on Wednesday, November 27th, which is the day before Thanksgiving. That's quickly approaching next week. So I could say with almost no doubt that The Irishman will be our next episode, and it's gonna be quite a big one. 3.5 hour movie, but I'm so excited. It's been one of my most anticipated of the year, and I'm very ready. Also, coming up in this final month of the year, we certainly may have an episode on Noah Baumbach's marriage story, which is coming out here in a few weeks. But the only other certain episode that we will definitely have, and I can guarantee right now, is The Rise of Skywalker, the new Star Wars film, which hits theaters on December 20th, the week of Christmas, and will certainly serve as our 2019 finale. Alright, guys, this has been Exit Music for a Film. Thank you for joining me once again, and remember, most importantly, please Keep going to the movies.